If you have aspirations of retiring early completely off dividends, you are going to need to invest into higher than average yielding dividend paying ETFs and stocks that are going to pay you a significant amount of dividend income on a monthly basis to cover all your bills and more. This is of course unless you have a massive amount of money to invest into, because in that case you could probably even buy normal index funds and get away with it. But for those investors like myself that are looking to retire early off of dividend income alone, in this video specifically we're going to go over 5 high yielding dividend paying ETFs that not only pay a substantial amount of dividend income to investors on a monthly basis, but on top of that, because of their higher than average yield, invest into these ETFs give investors the true possibility of retiring early completely off dividend income alone. So if you want to see which 5 ETFs I'm talking about, which could be potentially good candidates when it comes to retiring early off dividends, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into the first one. Real quick, for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook, where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker, where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. The first high yielding ETF that I think is a potential perfect candidate to use when it comes to retiring off dividend income, and not only that, it's potentially even retiring early, is none other than one of my favorite ETFs across the entire markets. I'm talking about the JP Morgan Nasdaq Equity Premium Income ETF, or JEPQ. Now this ETF offers basically the best of both worlds when it comes to a dividend paying ETF, especially a high yielding one at that. And this is because even though this ETF yields around 9% forward dividend yield, which is massive, this ETF is also traded up and to the right continuously over time. Now JEPQ is up around 9% in the max time frame. Year to date though, up around 8%, and over the last year almost 9%. So like I said, not only has this ETF been paying investors a ton of dividend income because of the massive starting yield, but also it's been growing their portfolios on top of that. Now JEPQ would be a good candidate to potentially retire early off of, because this ETF is offering around a 9 or 10% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which means for every $100 you invest into JEPQ, you're going to get paid around $9 or $10 per year. Or to be more specific, for every $53 share of JEPQ that you purchase as of right now, you're going to receive 40 or 45 cents more or less on a monthly basis, at least going off of the previous year or so. So because of JEPQ's performance, the quality of this ETF, and the strategy that it employs, and the performance long-term, JEPQ would be a perfect ETF to not only include in your dividend portfolio, but like I said, to even use to potentially retire early. Another ETF that I think is a perfect candidate when it comes to retiring early off dividend income, and this is because this ETF pays a ton in dividends every single month. I'm talking about SPYI, or the NEO's S&P 500 High Income ETF. Now SPYI has a trailing 12-month dividend yield of around 12%, so even comparing SPYI to JEPQ, SPYI pays even more in dividends than that. Now in the max time frame, SPYI is basically more or less flat. It's only up around 3%, and this is since August of 2022, so you haven't really made too much money off a price return when it comes to SPYI, although like I said a second ago, the dividends are massive when it comes to this one. To be specific, over the last year or so, SPYI has been paying investors right around 50 cents for every single share they invest into, which definitely adds up, especially as you stack more and more shares across your portfolio. Now, when it comes to retiring and using your dividends for bills and things, just think about this for a second. For every single bill that you have, maybe a $100 bill, you would only need around 200 shares of SPYI to completely have that bill covered by dividends. Another one of my favorite high yielders that I personally own, and an ETF that I definitely will be using when it comes time to retire off dividends only, is another NEO's ETF, or the NEO's Nasdaq 100 High Income ETF, or QQQI. Now even though QQQI is basically flat, and this is over the last 7 or 8 months now, this ETF offers a 15% more or less dividend yield, paying around 60 cents to investors more or less every single month, and this is for an ETF that costs around $50 per share. So that means that for every single share that you stack up of QQQI in your portfolio, you're going to, at least going off of history, receive 60 cents or 62 cents every single month, which is massive. Now this ETF is relatively new, so I don't have as much QQQI in my portfolio as that of SPYI or JEPQ for me personally, but this is another one to watch, and definitely one that could potentially replace your active income and help when it comes time to retire off dividend income alone. Another ETF that I think would be a perfect candidate to use when it comes to retiring completely off dividend income alone is DIVO, or the Amplify CWP Enhanced Dividend ETF. Now this ETF is amazing because just like JEPQ, this ETF has grown over time as far as price return goes. It's up almost 60% in the max time frame, but on top of that, this ETF pays a 4.5 or 5% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which is paying investors anywhere from 14 to 15 cents every single month consistently, which definitely adds up, especially for an ETF that costs under $40 per share. Now in my portfolio, I love mixing it up. I love having some ETFs like DIVO, like JEPQ, that have a little bit more upside potential. But also on top of that, dividend income is very important, especially because I personally want to get to the point where I can retire off dividends in the future altogether someday. So for that reason, it's nice to have different ETFs that pay a little bit more in dividends or have a little bit more growth potential. And in my portfolio, I personally have a little bit of everything. So if you love dividends, but you also want to see your portfolio grow, at least going off of historical performance, DIVO would be a perfect candidate to look into. Another dividend ETF that could potentially be a good option when it comes to building out a portfolio and using this portfolio as dividends when it comes time to retire is one of my favorite new ETFs. I've talked about this just as of recently. I'm talking about ticker symbol FDVV, or the Fidelity High Dividend ETF. Now this ETF, as you can see right here, is up around 17.4% over the last year. And on the max time frame, this ETF has grown like crazy, up over 93%. And this is since around 2016. But not only that, FDVV also has a 3% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which isn't the highest dividend. It isn't the highest starting yield. But with that, this ETF has not only grown like crazy over time, pays a decent starting yield, and also pays more and more in dividends, at least historically. So like I said, mixing things up, having some lower yield but more growth potential and some higher yield options in your portfolio is really going to give you the benefits, the best of both worlds, especially when it comes time to retire off of dividend income completely. So those are 5 different dividend paying ETFs that all could be potential candidates when it comes time to building out a dividend portfolio that you could even live off sometime in the future. Now, obviously, as you can see right here in my portfolio, I have a mix of everything. I have some ETFs that yield a lot higher, some that yield a little bit lower. And I truly think that it's important to have a diversified portfolio that truly offers the best of both worlds. And this is simply because although income is very important, I don't want a portfolio that's going to trade sideways or even down in the future. I want my portfolio to keep growing over time, but I also want a ton of dividend income to be paid to me consistently. But now lastly, most importantly, I want to hear from you guys down below when it comes to building a dividend focused portfolio, a portfolio that you're possibly going to even retire off of later on in the future from dividend income alone. What are 3 stocks or ETFs that you think are going to be most beneficial for your personal portfolio? Drop the ticker symbols in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.